Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another fantabulous Monday live stream. I am one of the many hosts, as you can see here on this wonderful stage that we have for you guys. I'm super excited. Today is actually going to be the last live stream of 2021. And to me, that's just crazy that we've already come to the end of 2021. I don't know what happened to this year. It just blew away with the wind. But I am excited because we are wrapping up our editing series of live streams. And over the last month or so, we've been talking about how to do developmental edits on your manuscripts. We've been providing editing feedback and some critiques for people. It's been a really good time, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed the madness that we have provided here for you, and that you've taken away some helpful golden nuggets of information that will help you guys as you move forward in pursuing your dream of writing. So a couple of things to just kind of make note of. I know that we've technically kind of come to the end of the editing portion of December, but if you would still like some feedback on your stuff, please feel free to submit down in the form below. It is still going to remain open, and the option is there to receive an email feedback. So if you want to still get some feedback from us coaches, please let me know. Us know via the form down below. In addition to that, we also got new free resources because we're awesome like that and we love you guys. So you'll find different resources and worksheets covering a multitude of different topics. And one of those things will be plots, outlines, all sorts of good stuff like that, in addition to revisions. And there's a whole revisions template that kind of gives you lots and lots of information there on just some easy ways to kind of get through the painful process that is revisions, because it is exceedingly painful. And per the usual, unless we get off on many wonderful tangents and provide you with even more copious amounts of information, we will be doing another editing sample, and potentially, and this part in particular is the one, if we don't get too off topic, is an editing sprint, which, I mean, we're all known to get a little off topic sometimes. I mean, so to start off here, we are going to open the floor to Mackenzie for the first question. And that first question is, what questions should an author have answers to by the time the developmental edit is done?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to answer this question without prior context to what kind of answers we're talking about. I'm just going to go off the cuff here. I think, in my opinion, as a writer, by the time you're done with your developmental editor, what their job is to do words is to help guide you through the development, quite literally, of your manuscript. So as you're writing, you can get feedback from the editor on how to move forward best through the plot. Whether you're a planner or a pantser, they're going to be there to help you point out glaring plot holes or where spots that need more development. I'm just going to use that word a lot. Need more fleshing out, need more explanation, need more character growth, etc. So one example, when I was working with my developmental editor, as I was writing this character who is a young college girl, I was introducing her to all these people she'd be working with at a museum, and my developmental editor goes, "Hey, make her interact with people her own age." And I was like, fine, if I have to. And that really did improve the character building of the story. So reluctantly, I did have her interact with people her own age, and that did really help move the plot in the direction I still wanted to go. It just made the story better. So the answers you should have by the time you're done working with a developmental editor is, what's the plot? Who are the main characters? Who are the supporting characters? Where are your inciting incidents? Where's the climax? What's the resolution? Pretty much just all the big picture elements before you get to the refining part.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the big things to tack on to that is that you should have all of the major glaring plot holes figured out. Not fixed, but figured out, just where they are.
And not too many convenient discoveries to fix those plot holes.
Magic.
I'm looking at you, Stephen.
What? I don't know what you mean. I do not know what you mean. So the mage happened to show up in the nick of time to keep characters from killing each other. You know. Total coincidence. Absolute coincidence. It just happened.
Or you could just let them die. You just let them kill each other.
No, they can't.
Kyra.
They can't.
Kyra has a dark side that she just revealed.
They are
For anyone who's read
designated for
Kyra's book,
characters.
that was perfectly on brand.
Yeah, no, I have plenty of death in store. I mean, just ask my poor beta readers who are going through my post-apocalyptic dystopian short story film right now. Not film. Good gosh. Book. I mean, I literally have one of the monsters like vividly just like pluck out a girl's eyeball and like eat it. And people are just the main character is just horrified. And they're like, ugh. Yeah, so fun times in store for all of those people. They're probably going to need a number 2 therapist. Anyway, any other thoughts from our other fellow coaches on anything that you think should be added to those answers that they should have by the time they're done?
Did I get them all?
You must have. They're just stunned by the big brain answer. That
It was very succinct. We are in agreement.
We bow to the superior knowledge of Mackenzie Finkley. All right. So next up, we will put Kyra in the hot seat. So what are the indications for an author to know that their story has a hook?
That is an excellent question. And really, I'm going to answer that question in a similar way that Mackenzie just did, by making sure that certain questions are answered, but also by making sure that the answers to those questions are more questions. So really, if after the first page of a book, a reader doesn't feel compelled to ask at least 3 questions, then something is wrong.
That's so good.
Because like you want to be incentivized to keep reading, and a story is a dialogue with the reader. And so I personally go through all of my edits framing it in terms of questions. I frame it in terms of questions that I want readers to ask me and questions that I know I have to answer for myself over the course of the editing process. But particularly when it comes to hooks, you want to make sure that these readers have at least 3 questions that you are kind of setting them up to have. Like, what are the stakes of the situation? Who's involved in the situation? And like, what is the general tone? Because stakes and tone are not exactly the same thing. Like, people could be dying, and there's a difference between the person who is the tone of the person who's like perpetrating the harm and the person who's experiencing the harm. That was kind of a dark example, but you get what I mean. So I think that is probably the best way to go about it. Always think of hooks in terms of questions, because just like a flashy scene or the incorporation of onomatopoeia, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to care. You know what I mean? Because some people might see that and be like, what? The last question that you want your readers to ask shouldn't just be a vague what. They should be directional.
That's good.
Would you feel, I have a follow-up question to this. Do you feel that having the reader ask why is more directional than what?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the question of why usually is anchored in relation to something, like why to a character, why to a setting, why is more contextually anchored than just what? like what is happening? What's going on? Like, what did I just see?
What did I
That
just
kind of
read?
thing.
Right.
Question.
I'm
What
drawn
did
to
I just
famous
read?
book openings that are ones that are like, I was running for my life. And you're like, why?
Exactly.
I have another follow-up question, actually. You raised a good point, Kyra. So, do you think that every chapter should end with a hook, with a strong hook, or do you allow, when writing, do you allow your chapters to kind of flow as it goes, even though some chapters might not have as strong a hook as maybe the beginning or the end?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. So I think, again, I hate using this dichotomy because it is, again, somewhat false, but it really does, for me, in my mind, it really does depend on whether or not the transitional chapters are between a plot-driven transition or a character-driven transition. Because sometimes you just kind of want your character to like lay down in their bed and contemplate things. And there are other times where like, but alas, they're recovering from a battle, you know? So I think there's kind of like this sense of there can be a softness to the beginning and ends of things, particularly if things are character driven, because you're busy building the context and the personality of the person or the dynamics of the people in the scene. But if it's plot driven, then you want it to be more hook oriented because people are going to want to care about the kind of like the parrying sort of. It's almost, it's like sometimes, this is a weird example because I don't know why I'm thinking of fencing suddenly, but sometimes you want for your chapters to operate like the lead up to a fencing match, and sometimes you want it to be like the description of the parrying and the battle itself.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a real good point.
Yeah, I think the mini cliffhangers, those mini hooks, are really great to have at the end of many of your chapters. That's how I built my book, was that it always, each chapter has a kind of beginning, middle, and an end. And at the end of each chapter, it's either leading into the next chapter or just kind of having a subtle play of a hook that I will kind of circle back around to maybe in a chapter or two or a little bit further down the line. But yeah, I think that to Kyra's point, the questions is really where that hook lies. Is if it's not why is this happening, it's what happens next. And that what happens next in particular, that's what keeps people reading. The why, as Mackenzie pointed out, is that why is this happening? I must read what happens next. So they kind of lead into and play off of each other a lot, I think.
There's a really good example of a book from a book I'm reading right now, Invisible Man. I'm finally reading that for the first time. Long time coming. But basically, there's this one chapter that could have ended like a couple pages earlier and it would have been perfectly resolved. But no, they move on to the next set piece and then just end the chapter right in the middle of it. And somebody's on the verge of life and death. And so the question you're asking, you're not like leaving the chapter with the takeaways from what the whole main chapter is about. You're leaving the chapter with what's going to happen. I have to keep reading because I want to know whether this guy lives or dies. And that's what keeps you going forward. And then other times the questions are more like deep and more, yeah, you kind of ease into them. And, oh, what does this mean? And I
Tender
think
moments.
Yeah. And as long as people aren't asking questions out of like sheer confusion, because I feel like there's maybe the difference between leaving your reader intentionally in the dark about things that you want to save for later. That's pretty artful, and it can be. And then just, I'm confused. What?
Yeah. Wanting to avoid the I is confusion. Or that like is this a hook? Type of question. Like that's not what you want to have happen with your readers. That's not a good thing. All right, so we have come to editing sample time, and we have had. Let's see if I have it. Oh, I did. Yes.
Let's drag it. I intentionally picked a section that like needs work, friends. There is one sentence in particular that is just the absolute worst, and I challenge you to find it.
Oh boy. All right.
Yeah,
this
I
is
was
what
gonna
we
ask,
look
do you
forward
want
to.
us to find it, or do you want to give us like which one it is?
No,
I want
let's-
after I read it, I want you to tell me which one you think it is that I'm
Okay.
talking about.
As long as we all don't end up with different ones.
Yeah, I was gonna
That
say,
would be good.
Yeah,
art
that'd
is
be good.
very subjective. Art is very subjective. What if we all pick a different sentence?
This
Well, then we will
paragraph
just
needs
completely
work.
ruin
I've
Mackenzie's
accepted
self-esteem.
that.
Fine.
I've accepted that this paragraph needs work. That's why I picked it for your eyes, because I trust you all.
I don't think I'll even find one. I'm just messing.
Okay. Okay,
All
are we
right.
ready?
We are ready.
We are ready.
Narrator voice. We trudged inland for nearly an hour, following Quentin like a row of ducklings as he slashed his way through the roughage with an obscenely large machete. Margot stayed close by my side behind Miss Carter, who followed behind Quentin with Victor at her side. Behind us were two brooding crewmen lugging our belongings and supplies for a 5-day stay. The walk wasn't just a 30-minute walk down a trail or the city sidewalk. It was a hike through rugged terrain, over bulging roots, through prickly shrubs and sticks stabbing at you from all sides. Swatting bugs, sweating as I swam through the humid air, all while wearing heels. How many decades before it became socially normal for women to wear sneakers, I wondered.
So I'm inclined to say the walk wasn't just a 30-minute walk down a trail or the city sidewalk.
You got it. You got it. You know why? Because I used the word
it's
walk
just
3 times.
But that's
And
just a
behind.
repetition of words. That's not like a garbage sentence. Like change a word up and like here and there, and you're fine. The
one that
dramatics
bothers me
of a
the most
writer.
because- yeah, it's the one that bothers me the most because I've been trained by my editor. The number one thing he looks out for is if he sees a word repeated too close to each other, I get in trouble. So when
Yeah.
I found this section, I was like, oh, don't tell him I use the word walk and the same 3 times in one sentence.
That's a good editor. Because that's
Yeah.
immediately the first thing that I noticed besides everyone's behinds. There's lots of
Yes.
behinds. Behinds for days. Behinds walking places.
Yep. I had a hard time figuring out how to describe the positioning of the people in the group.
Mm.
Because it matters, because the setting that I'm trying to show you is that the women are intentionally protected in the lineage of the people processing.
And this is from a point of view of the girl who is being protected?
Yes.
Okay, so there you go. You can describe her feeling like she's protected by being surrounded by all these men. That's a possibility. If it's like if it's from her point of view, like that's an easy fix. That's a good one. Because you can
Good to
just
know.
have her look around and see all these men, I suppose, or just her companions sort of surrounding her and describe how that feels.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing here is more narrator than character.
Yeah.
And so I think getting more into that character's head of what is she thinking, not just what is she narrating to us, but getting into the moment with her as she's taking in everything. She glances behind her shoulder and she sees the 2 brooding people, lugging their baggage. That would be kind of the first thing that comes to mind, is that there's that separation from the character a little bit. The second one, and this was partly because I think the font just automatically goes to all cap that I've chosen. So I might need to correct that for future ones, because I couldn't tell if there was another period in that second paragraph, or excuse me, from the walk, that part through the rest of it.
It gets to be a run-on sentence. That's another one that's
the runniest
needs
run
some
on.
splitting.
Yeah, and again, I think that you'll see that improve from a character's point of view when you are describing the things as they are happening to her versus her kind of as if she was writing it down or narrating it to somebody.
You are bringing the reader into the experience if she's an active participant in what's happening to her. And by the way, this is all criticism, but that opening paragraph is so good. Like, it's so well written, and I feel like no one has yet said it, so I am saying it. It's so well written. Like, props to you.
Oh, thank you. I like the word roughage. I had to look up how to spell it.
Our lovely Emily Vanderбent had a thought, like, have her think something about it, especially if being hemmed in and protected is contrary to how she usually is treated or behaves.
Yeah, it might be a good opportunity for sarcasm too. I don't know the tone or the vibe of the character. I'm assuming she's from the future because that's pretty cool. That last sentence really hooks me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's cool. But I really think like maybe a word like the way the men are shielding us or something could kind of, you could just build that up as you're going along with the descriptors and really get us into the character's head about how it's weird, the fact that the women are being shielded.
Yes, because, and I think Kyra would have good insight to this. This young woman is a 20-something living in New York in the 21st century, and she gets sent back in time, and now she's being, herded and told to shut up constantly and to wear dresses and heels in the most inconvenient of situations. Kyra, do you think that this is completely different from life in New York as an independent 20-something?
Yes. It is ever so different. Like, men concerned for your safety? What's that? No one knows. I don't know.
Oh my god!
Shots fired at
Shots fired.
Anyway, no, I thought everything was super strong. I mean, I just wanted to, like, you pointed out the problem sentence, but to Zara's earlier point, I guess it's just really a matter of replacing a word. I think it's interesting, like Stephen's earlier point about the placement of the character in relation to the scene, because I think it really does depend on the broader context of the book itself. Like, if you want, it could be interesting if you want to sort of oscillate between Odessa being in the moment versus Odessa telling the story to someone else. Like, you could play with that. I don't know, because it is a matter of narration. And I guess that would kind of be time operating on two different planes, like in the articulation of the story and in her telling it, if she is telling it. But I don't know. I was intrigued by that tension. But overall, I do agree that whenever you decide, that needs to be clarified.
Yeah. Yes, not that being the biggest decision weighing on me at the moment.
But yes, you really got to the heart of her being shook. Like, what is this? These men are shielding? What? Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
All of those things. I felt it. I felt it.
Good, because it's also that uneasy feeling, right? Of them being like, okay, do you remember watching the Tarzan animated movie?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The crewmen carrying all the stuff who end up, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie in the past 20 years, caging all the gorillas. In the beginning, you're kind of like, yeah, they're all right. But like, as you're like, they seem a little sus though. That's kind of the feeling I was trying to,
Yeah.
I think the word brooding accomplishes that pretty well.
Brooding does equal suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Usually. I mean, and I can totally say that in full confidence, because I have a McBroody in my post-apocalyptic dystopian. He is just the broodiest of broods, and he's actually not a bad guy. But he's I think what's going to end up happening, and this is just a side note because I didn't put anything up on for my writing, but I essentially, it almost becomes the Last of Us relationship almost between him and the main character Kayla by the end of book one. Or at least that's kind of where it leaves off, because everybody's eyeballs have been ripped out by, eyeball eating monsters.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, bad things happen, and he's like, well, what are we going to do? Survive. I'm like, that's right, Broody McBruderson. You're going to survive, because book 2 has to happen.
It's like he has a brooding easy button. What are we going to do? Survive.
Brooding rest place.
Brood and survive. The two options that are available currently. That's it. All right. Vincent, you're going to be up next. So, if you were a literary agent with fiction orientation, what is it that you would look for in a submitted manuscript?
Yes. For some context first, so that people know I'm not just coming from nowhere, I did have a lot of experience with submissions and querying before coming to New Degree Press, and I made every mistake in the book that you can make before coming here. So I have an understanding of a lot of different types of feedback that agents can give you in this process in acquiring books and bringing on authors. And one of the big things that I noticed was agents having a problem with the character arc, or that being the piece. Like, oh, we like your writing, but the character, there's something off with the character arc right now. And I think it comes back to ultimately advice we've given before is having the developmental edit down first. And I don't think maybe it's a wise idea to submit your first draft or just some sort of second draft of terms of, grammatical edits, which is all out of order, to an agent and expect that to be what hooks. Because I think the things that agents most want to see out of somebody they're thinking of acquiring, a book they're thinking of acquiring and bringing on for their, financial benefit, and somebody they could have a business relationship with in the publishing industry, is somebody who has an understanding what the story is, has that figured out, and has it laid out for them to see. And also, I would add that they can't really pitch that to publishers. They can't really sell it unless you already have that down. So I think having the things that you would have as the fundamentals from a developmental editing standpoint are probably the most important in starting that kind of traditional publishing route through an agent and getting that going on. So even if you have to, if you have some developmental editing experience, even if you're doing it yourself or going and getting a developmental editor before you even start querying agents, I think is probably a good move. On top of that, I would think too, they want to look for somebody that they think could replicate more than just one book idea and has some more creative juices beyond just the one project. And there's, I don't know the exact ways they'd be able to tell that, right? Like that's super specific to each person, but they want to see that you have more than just one thing up your sleeve, that you're easy to work with, good at communicating. And then also on top of that, I would say they want us to know that you're just not, littered with errors everywhere, right? Like you don't have to have all your revisions editing down before submitting, before trying to go the agent route, but you don't want to just have a book that's just like, hampered with grammatical errors and really tough to read in that sense. So it has to be at least a little bit clean. But I think the most important thing out of all that is story, character, plot, those things mostly figured out, down pat, laid out well, developmental edits pretty much done.
Nice. And so like I haven't done any querying before. So like when you are searching for an agent, what is the like one or a couple of things that authors should look for And speaking specifically of fiction here, like for fiction agents, like how can they really set themselves up for success in pitching it to a particular agent? Because I know some people were like we're just going to shotgun blast as many agents as possible, and it's just going to be copy and paste, you know, and we're just going to play the Russian roulette version of querying.
Yeah.
And then others are like very methodical, like surgical in their precision, and they could send out 4 and still not hear back. Like, so like what for you would help their chances?
I think that's probably going to be sort of a repeat of advice from job hunting that probably everybody hears. You know, you could cast a wide net, and if you want to do it really quickly and just get as many as possible, maybe some will say yes, and maybe you'll have it line up. Great, that's fine. That might be a strategy that works for you. My gut tells me, and from my experience, tell me that you really want to cater to who you want to be your agent, honestly. And because you're not the only one that is kind of hoping this relationship will work, your agent has something to benefit from this situation as well. And you want to make sure you have the right one because they're sort of your book's advocate with the publisher. And you don't want to get into a business relationship with the wrong agent. So knowing that the agent has some experience with your types of books, or at least has a passion towards going towards that, and sort of has the systems behind them to actually be useful as an agent to you, I think it's important to do research on each one rather than just say, okay, who are the top 200 agents right now? Let me send out a forum thing and just change the name and maybe a couple words here and there and just pump it out and send it. You know, you maybe even want to really tailor it to just a handful that you really care about and do that kind of in waves. And I think that usually will lead to more meaningful successes, but it might take longer and it might be a little disheartening to get no's from people that you put a lot of effort into rather than a no from, oh, okay, I just submitted to it, I don't really care. So kind of a trade-off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have any of our other coaches done any sort of querying or just have some general insights to kind of add on to that?
No, because I'm stubborn. I think, like, for me, my hot take, my toxic trait, the concept of having an agent, like applying to college, applying for schools or for jobs is hard enough. But the concept of having to not only apply to get an agent, and then the agent having to speak on your behalf to a publishing house instead of you pitching your own work, the thing that you wrote, that whole system to me is just like red flag, red flag, red flag. Like it's never been something that appealed to me. I watch actively on Twitter people talk about querying because I'm curious. Like, how does this work? And the whole process from beginning to end, like the victories, when I read them, they feel hollow to me because I've watched how much they've struggled the entire time. And it's just, it's unappealing to me personally. That's my hot take.
Yeah, I would agree with you, especially with the hollow victory. Like, that really resonated with me because I talked to a lot of traditionally published authors, and they describe these sometimes, I don't think that using the word horrifying is too much, experiences where they were bullied into crossing out the entire character arcs, characters, and just their publishers sat on their manuscript for 2 years for no reason. And it was just like when it finally got published, their work is just exactly, they would describe it as hollow victory. So I think you're right on. I mean, obviously, this is just like a very, very subjective personal opinion. But
right.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, and I want to say, just because I'm giving advice on it, I actually came to the same conclusion as both of you. Obviously, that's sort of why I published with New Degree Press and went this route, the hybrid publishing route, because I got really disillusioned with the whole agent querying system and the sort of stories I was hearing too about afterwards. And I understand why people would do it, and there are great success stories out of it. Obviously, like that's how a lot of people have gotten published over the years. But I think there are lots of times where it goes horribly wrong. And it is something to be really careful about. and to not view it as some sort of golden ticket, because if an
Right.
agent says yes to you, it's not like your path to success is made. You know, I think
Right.
there's sort of
Yeah.
that misconception in the industry. It's like, well, once you get an agent, whew, you're all good from there. It's
Yeah,
like,
you have to
no.
remember that you hold all the cards, because it's very easy in all of this asking, please take my manuscript, please take my manuscript. You start to feel very vulnerable and feel like you don't have any control over the situation, when in reality, it's all your work. You have control.
Yeah.
Just because an agent says that they want to take you doesn't mean you have to go with that agent. Just because a publishing house offers you a deal doesn't mean that you have to take it.
Yeah, that's why they remove your ownership, so that they could control your vulnerability. That's the power that they hold over you. When they remove the
also
ownership of your book, and then you're like, well, I guess I'll I guess I'll publish, or whatever that meme is, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just the ownership in the financial sense, which is obviously super important, because they do.
No, like a creative ownership. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I should have clarified that. Totally.
No.
Yeah. That's a whole another thing with like how much you're actually getting financially, but like creative ownership, like they just get to decide what you should write. So yeah, go ahead, Vincent. Yeah.
No, yeah, I was just saying, yeah, it's a balance of both of those, because some people have different motivations for publishing. And obviously, as a writer, I would hope that your only motivation is not just financial. So you want to have both of those sides fulfilled. And it's really hard to get that out of the traditional publishing system a lot of times for a lot of authors. So it's a tough road, but it can work. And I don't want to discourage people from doing it if that's what you believe is best, but really do your real research and really know the other options that are out there, including what we all did, which worked out for all of us in so many ways. So I would advocate for at least researching different paths.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that actually brings up a good question. And this wasn't one of the prepared questions. Man, I am just like this stuttering box tonight. My brain has completely fried by
okay. Like, take your time.
Yeah, it's just go slow, guys. Yeah, it's been a year, man.
It's been some year.
It's a couple of years. Let's be honest. But not part of the planned slides or anything like that. But since we were kind of talking about the differences between the traditional publishing route, which we've seen many people go, we've seen amazing success stories, and then we've seen or at least heard of just horrific instances where people just the name of the book was changed, the cover was changed, they had nothing, and then they're like, by the way, here's 5%.
Yeah.
Those are legitimate stories that are out there. And I think for everybody, one of the things to remember is that for those watching, is that we're not dissing traditional publishing. That was just not the appeal for us.
No.
This is also read the fine print.
Yeah,
right.
This is highly
absolutely
subjective.
You have to read the fine print, and you have to understand what you are willing to give up.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what is key, is what are you willing to give up? For me, I was not willing to give up the creative control or the rights or the royalties for my hard work, which brings me to the question for us coaches is how many iterations of I'm going to publish a book did you go through? And what led you to where you were at when you decided this is the route that I want to go? And I know we're kind of straying a little bit from the editing portion of it, but I think this is just really good conversation for those who are watching to be able to kind of glean from it as they move through their edits.
I want to hear Vincent's answer to this question.
Yeah, okay, I'll go for it. So for context, I started writing my book when I was 12 years old. And so I had lots of misconceptions because I was a preteen. And I started, my whole first draft. Then I realized, I need to do research because it's historical fiction. So I scrapped 100 pages, restarted, did research. I was all over the map, did so many things wrong. And I did little things right, but it took me 7 years for a reason to get to where I am. And the first time I ever queried an agent was 2 years into the process. I hadn't even finished my first draft, and I was 14 years old. And I submitted it to this guy in LA who did both media rights and book rights. I'm like, oh, I want to go with him because I want my book to become a movie. So I submitted to him, and he was really sweet, responded to me really quickly and said, not for me, thanks anyway. And I was like, well, at least he responded. I know some people don't respond. And then over the next like 2 or 3 years, I was just submitting to agents. I would do research as I was writing the book. And I eventually finished my first draft and did little edits here and there, but I didn't really know the difference between developmental edits or revisions editing. I didn't research that process, and I thought I was too good to have to go buy an editor. And basically, I got lots of no's. I probably submitted to about 20 to 25 agents over the course of 2 years, and I tried to do meaningful submissions to each one. And the feedback I kept getting was, this is really well written, especially for your age, but your character arc is missing something. I'm not hooked right away on that aspect. And so come to find out, I enter college. I'm starting to get a little disillusioned with everything. Somebody I know posted that they published in New Degree Press. I looked into it, had some, okay, should I really do this? I wanted to do traditional publishing. I did my research. I'm like, wait a second, this answers all my problems. And yeah, there are trade-offs, of course. I don't want to just say, oh, this is perfect, because there are trade-offs for sure. But I think for what I was looking for and for who I was, it was definitely the best option. I went ahead and went with it. And that's how I got my book published. And I feel really good in the creative ownership sense at the end of all this. And after all that kind of struggling through it, I feel like I have a much better understanding of everything. And I feel good about it.
Nice. How about for you ladies?
Okay, fine. Twist I'll go. Oh, sorry, Simona. There was a lag. Go ahead, Simona, please. Zara, excuse me.
No,
Zara.
no worries. Go ahead, Mackenzie. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
Oh my
gosh. It's completely fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So for me, my story begins with nonfiction. So it's a little bit different because I was not at all like planning to write a book. It was I'm sorry, the comments. I was not at all planning to write a book. It kind of was something that I knew I wanted to do at some point in my life because I really liked writing. That much I knew. And when I was younger, like 12, I started writing a book in my diary. Don't even get me started. That's lost to the flood now. It's gone. But when I first heard about the CREATE program where this professor is like, hey, you want to write a book? I'm like, yes, I do. Say more. That was how I came into doing the first book. But when it comes back to you have an idea for a fiction novel, after learning all this stuff about the publishing industry and what all the different options are, having published one book and having that behind me, and then going, okay, I could take this manuscript and I could go and query and do the traditional publishing stuff and give that a whirl and do all these things. And then after I learned much of the things that I've previously mentioned and observed and watched everybody else, I was like, maybe not this one. Maybe a different one, maybe someday, but not this one. And that was kind of a decision I made for this book. So that's not to say that I might not try it in the future with a different book, but I think this is not necessarily answering the question of how many iterations of I want to publish a book did I go through, but it's a question of book by book for me, what kind of author I want to be.
That's a really good point. I like that because that's something that I've thought about as well. Is I did because for me, I knew that I wanted to be an author since I was 16. That's what I was going to do. And then when everybody asked me, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, an author. They're like, but for real. And I was like, an author. They're like, oh, you poor thing. Don't you know that they all just starve and wither away and only make pennies? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, so you're just wrong in the head. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay, anyway, moving on. But the last, 15 years now, I've done lots of research, and I've looked into, the traditional publishing and like what you get, what you lose. And I still don't know everything about it, but I knew enough to know that I am putting in all of my hard work to see this vision come to pass, and I'm then giving it to someone else, and they can screw it up. Like if I screw it up, that's different. But if they screw it up, I get screwed royally. I was like, so I don't really want to do that. Plus,
your name's on it.
Right. I was like, and I would like to be paid for my work. It's an amazing concept, I know. Big brain stuff here, guys. And so I was like, okay, self-publishing, that's the route for me. And then the more I learned as a developmental editor of the editing process, the cost across the different forms of editing, this is, I realized it was going to be very expensive, to go through and do all of the things and pay market rate, which again, this is not to say that there aren't things out there that are cheaper, but this is speaking to like, if you're going to pay somebody for what they are offering you, then you can easily pay at least $3,000 for self-publishing. And that is not including the ISBNs needed and any promotional stuff that you want to do. So you can easily get up in the neighborhood of about $5,000. Now, I know there are lots and lots of authors who do it, and they're like, I only published my book for $800. I'm like, yeah, you did. That's great. I'm not saying you can't do it for that. Right. And that's usually what it is. It's like, oh yeah, I found you in Amazon on the free section. Yeah, there is a reason why, like we all say, no one judges a book by its cover. That is a flat out lie. If someone says that, smack them. Like the Batman smacking Robin meme, like straight up.
That phrase applies to everything except books.
Right.
Whose covers are meant to be judged.
Yes, that is literally why people go to school for graphic design, to learn how to make the pretty things attractive. That is the whole thing. So realizing that, I was just like, well, guess I'm never going to get my book published because I is the broke. So, and then when I became developmental editor for the Creator Institute, and I watched my students go through the process of crowdfunding to get their books published, which several of them are back here on the special shelf. I was like, man, that's a really cool way of covering all of the costs, and like I get to retain the rights to my book. Like that's really cool. And so that's why I ended up deciding to do that through NDP. And, as I look forward to book 2 and the writing of it and kind of planning out what I want to do and looking forward to the crowdsourcing and getting people excited about it, like the things that I can offer as an experience with me, and merchandise and things of that nature, the things that all of us authors love to think about, author merch, just like all of the merch. That is why I decided to go the route of kind of the self-published hybrid publishing. But to your point, Mackenzie, of like, I'm actually in a place now where I wouldn't be opposed to probably a small press, like a small independent traditional publisher. I have a friend who, she's getting 15% royalties, which is exceedingly high for.
That's good. Yeah.
For traditional publishing. So I was like, for something like this, like I would definitely be open to looking at that. It'll be very dependent on the book, because as a gritty Christian fiction author, I can't think of a Christian publisher that would come within 39 and a half feet of my books, because they're not the squeaky clean, And there are traditional publishers in the general market that are like, yeah, but you kind of need to remove the God stuff from there. And I'm like, yeah, so neither of those works for this fantasy trilogy. So it'll probably be straight self-publishing for these, but for other books, who knows?
That's kind of like the beauty and the not
Beast.
so beautiful of thank you of publishing, is that a lot of these houses will want your work to align with their brand, which is why, because most of these houses are imprints of some larger house. Like you've got the big four, and every other small imprint that they have is every other small house you can think of. And so they have all these different imprints for all of these different brands and for that purpose. Like, for example, the Disney publishing house has a brand that has the word Disney nowhere in it because that particular brand publishes some spicy stuff, which is against the overarching Disney family friendly brand that they present. But it's still part of their,
Disney XD.
So they're looking not just at the brand, but like at the overall market in general and what is selling right now. So they look at the brand, they look at the climate, and they look at your social media following, especially these days, and then they make a decision. So like talent, unfortunately for them, comes like fifth at best.
Yeah, that's also very much a thing that you have to deal with now that authors, even maybe 20 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, didn't have to deal with, is they want you to have an audience. Why?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's very interesting is the publisher is not primarily responsible for the marketing and promotion of your book. They want you to already have an audience because it is going to, in a big way, fall on your shoulders as the author to promote your book. And that's maybe the reason you may have an amazing, now this is heartbreaking, I hate to say it, but you might have an incredible book. And if they don't feel that you have a great audience, or, I mean, this can get into some hairy stuff with pseudonyms and stuff, that gets different. But if they don't feel that you have the audience or the book's not going to sell itself, you might be in a sticky wicket.
But there's additional tea to that, even though I concur with all aforementioned statements and the kids you just said. But because you could find yourself in the opposite situation, you might say like, oh, I have to spend all this time building up my audience. And I'm not saying it won't happen, but it's highly unlikely that you'll reach and have an audience as big as Billie Eilish. Her book just came out, and comparatively speaking, it sold 64,000 copies or something within the first week or so. Comparatively speaking to her audience, that is a bust. We're all thinking 64,000 copies. That's great. But compared to all the money and all of the hype that they had surrounding this book, it was like a marketing bust. And
it was a flop, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right. I mean, and really, Billie Eilish shouldn't really promote it because, like, does she have to? She's Billie Eilish, like, you know what I mean? But I mean, that's another thing too. Like, in navigating traditional publishing deals, like, there is that additional component of they make all kinds of assumptions about how a book is going to perform. And because you're not the one with all the cards, as Mackenzie was saying earlier, if something goes wrong and the poop is no longer in a group and it goes everywhere, you're the one that has to pay up or come to the bottom line, even if they're the ones that messed up or didn't support you in the way that they should have. So it's like, that's part of the reason why that vulnerability was kind of too much for me, at least at this point in my life. Never say never, but I think that is also, just to build off on our previous conversation, I just feel like there's just way too much gatekeeping that happens. Way too much. Like the agent system, let's just say the way the system works right now, only 11% of
I was about to say
books are by people of color. So something is wrong. Something is wrong. That's all. There's so much gatekeeping.
Yeah. Totally. We are just fighting an uphill battle, especially our generation. Like some of the authors didn't have to deal with that, like Mackenzie said 20 years ago, right? And they were more willing to bank on talent when they saw talent. Right now, all they see is, do you have an audience to sell this to? Do you have a dedicated audience to sell this to? Because it's a lot of money to publish a book. Will we see a return on our investment? So they are being more cautious. They added so many gatekeepers to, yeah, Kyra said it, like that's it. To keep people certain out is just, it breaks my heart, but yeah, that's the tea.
The thing too to that is it feels sometimes like there's propaganda around the bar being lower for self-publishing and for hybrid publishing and those kinds of things. But what you guys are saying is sometimes the bar is not just higher to be, with hearing, with agents, with traditional publishing. It's just set in entirely different wrong places. Like it's not at all about the book or the talent in lots of ways. It's all these other bars that you can't control and that don't correlate to that. And you could still go through the process like we all did and have lots of resources and support and hard work to make your book really good. And you learn a lot from it. You learn about the different steps of editing and you still get those kinds of results that make your book better. It's not just going to come out and be like some bad thing without the quality if you put in that work and have those resources.
Exactly. I was about to add the part of the reason why the bar seems low, or we get flack for the bar seeming low by and large, is for, like Stephen said, people who take shortcuts and just don't ask for help. They just whip up something on Microsoft Paint and put it on Amazon.
And put it on Amazon. Yeah, it just makes me so mad, because when art is not respected, then and you don't respect your art, then who else is going to respect your art? And I compared it to like you refurbishing your kitchen some live streams ago. Like if you don't have the resources to pay someone, a carpenter, to come and refurbish your kitchen, then you just don't do it. But books are not treated that way, right? You don't take time to hire editors and just work on your book before you send it out to the world. It makes me insane. So
well, and I think that in the places where you have decided that, you know what, I want to do this myself, I want to do it, DIY, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you think about it for a moment, what does what is the first thing that you do? You're going to Google how to do it in YouTube. And then you're going to watch like 18 YouTube videos on how to do it. And then you're going to go do it. And then you're going to bust something. And then you're going to go back and you're going to watch another 38 videos to figure out how to fix it. And then go back to the original video that you were using to try and do it the correct way. But the difference is that you are trying to learn how to master those aspects, not half-ass it in order to get something out. That is the difference. And so for everybody watching, just to clarify here, that the people who are half-assing it, that's who we're talking about. Those are the people who give authors a bad name, not the people who are actually putting in the hard work to figure out, how do I do a good developmental edit myself? How do I do a good copy edit myself? How do I do a good proofread myself? How do I make sure that if I'm going to create my cover design, that I watch videos to learn how to manipulate images in a way that I can make it look appealing, make it look good. We're not talking about those people. Those people are hustling. Those people are able to cut the cost, but they're making up for it in their time.
Yep.
There's a trade-off, right? So you can either pay, and if you're not careful, you can pay out the wazoo for somebody because you decided like, well, I'm just going to hire them off of Fiverr. And I totally get it because I'm a Fiverr guy. Okay. I did developmental editing on Fiverr. I know people who are on Fiverr and they are wonderful people and they do a good job. They really, really do. But the vast majority of the people on Fiverr are not worth the $5 that they are charging you. They're simply not.
Well, you get what you pay for.
Absolutely.
You get
If you're
get what
looking
you
for a deal.
Yep. You get a
But
deal.
what kind of a deal? Like you're missing an adjective there. What kind of a deal?
A steal of a
There's an
deal.
adjective. Like the way
Yeah.
the way I look at it, right? Even though like this may come off a little bit insensitive, but like the harsh truth is that money is a renewable source. Your time isn't, right?
Right.
So like you can hassle and you can find a way to make money. Like they always come back, but your time doesn't. That's not a renewable source. So yeah.
Hot take.
Yeah, way to
I
go
know.
deep on this all of a sudden. Jeez.
I know. Yeah.
So did that answer your
crisis.
question, Steven?
Mortality.
Yeah, I mean, just
All that
dang.
good?
Jeez. Way to just do a mic drop. Like,
Thank you.
Hashtag mortality, am I right?
fatality. Yeah. So, guys, I hope that, over the course of this, that you, the viewer, have, gotten a lot of insights and information. I know not everybody's going to agree with us. I know that I get in fights with people almost daily in a Facebook group because there's like, I won't even get on that soapbox, but I get in fights with people almost daily, which is
Don't
why I
drop
stopped
the F
posting.
word here, please.
No, but that's why I stopped fighting with them, for the most part. But our goal, our heart is to try and help authors see the options. And if you decide to go the traditional publishing route, that is one of the options that we're trying to help you do better.
Yeah.
Like I've had people ask me, should I get a developmental editor before I go to an agent? I'm like, maybe. Because I mean, technically you don't have to. It's going to go through a developmental edit because they're professionals anyway. But also you don't have to fork out the money. You can actually just learn how to do a good developmental edit, go through it yourself and present a second draft to the agent, and you will have taken the time necessary to actually present them with something that is good. It doesn't look like a dumpster fire, but that doesn't mean that traditional publishing is bad. It wasn't for us. I know lots of friends who it was for them, and they're perfectly happy with that. And I'm happy for them. I like to hustle. I like to go this route. I like to learn new things. And I think that my fellow author coaches would say we've all enjoyed the learning process of how to, and it's made us better authors for it, having gone through this. So, guys, I hope that you all are excited for January, because we're going to be talking about how to apply the edits that we've talked about, because we've talked about doing a developmental edit, really kind of taking a look at that bigger picture. And January is kind of like, okay, let's now look at how do we apply those. What is the goal moving forward? And then we're going to get into next year some really great stuff of like how to do author branding, how to do marketing, what some of the pros and cons for going strictly on Amazon versus going wide and vice versa. It's going to be really good stuff. But really what I'm happy for is that we have come to the end of this stream, still sane, still intact, and okay, kind of, sort of. But really, I hope
I'm dead.
All of you guys have a wonderful Christmas and a fantastic New Year. And then that you guys will come back in January to join us again for all of the fun stuff that we have planned. So from me to all of you guys, I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we will see you in January. Take care, everybody.